Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Shannon from Good Fruit, and we are back. Last week we discussed what it meant to live in a place that we were never intended, and what it was like when we were living inside of the garden in a space that God actually meant for us. Now, if you didn't catch last week, there were these two spaces, one in which we live in, where it's a fallen, corrupt reality, and then the other one in which God intended for us to live in, which is in spirit and truth and in proximity and relationship with Him. So if we were never intended to live here, how do we get back in union and in proximity to God? We exist in the flesh, which is a state of continual aging, and at some point we die. If God never intended for us to die, and we were meant to be eternal and in spirit and in truth and in His presence and in relationship with Him, how are we able to get back into that relationship? Because in the garden, there was never flesh. And if we were never meant to exist here in this space, how is it even possible that I am alive? Well, we have a soul. We're always intended to have a soul. We've always had a soul that makes us our own individual person, is our soul. That when He knitted every single one of us into existence, that we always had our soul. But in the garden, we were connected to Him through the Spirit and the truth. So now that we're here, if we're now soul and flesh, the soul animating this flesh, how then will we ever become of spirit and truth again? Well, I told you last week that the only next possible place to go was to Jesus. Jesus makes that next step possible. And for those that understand what it means to be baptized, that we know that that is a two-step process. One, the baptism of John, which is the water baptism that cleanses this flesh, this vessel, piece of meat that's animated by our soul. And then there's the second baptism, which is the baptism of Messiah, baptism of Jesus. What is that baptism? And what happens when you receive that baptism from Jesus Himself? Now, I described with you guys a couple weeks ago my encounter with Jesus in that Space Immersion Church, but I really didn't explain to you guys what that process was like. When I got to meet Jesus, one of the questions that Chris had asked me was, do you believe in Jesus as the Messiah, the truth, and the way? Do you believe in what Jesus did, what He accomplished when He was here, and who sent Him to accomplish what He did? And when I said yes to that, Jesus knew in my heart that I meant what I said. Him being in that space and in that room, when I encountered Him, He baptized me. He shared with me what He shared with the disciples that He told to wait, the Helper, the Spirit of the Father. To be baptized by the Holy Spirit is to receive the baptism of Messiah. And in that moment, I was born again in spirit and in truth. So now we live here in a fallen creation in a new way amongst the new covenant. So being animated, now I have the discernment through the Holy Spirit to now exist in a place in the fallen and corrupt reality, back in communication with God. This new covenant is very special, as I was saying, because when Jesus returns, it no longer exists. This thing drops dead and it stays here, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. And then I will go and return to the place in which God intended us to live in spirit and in truth, and in His presence, which is currently up in the heaven, seated next to the Father. So in the new covenant, what makes this such a special place is that now We're not only just living in a fallen reality with all of the knowledge of good and evil, but all the discernment made possible through communication with Jesus Christ. This is what Jesus did when he died on the cross for us. He gave us the ability to now be born again, to escape this reality. And I know you're talking to me on this computer through this lens. What reality have you actually escaped if you are sitting here in front of me telling me this story? That what I see around me in the world that is darkness is the only thing that will ever be made possible. And then the other truth to it all is that I will never die. I am eternal again through the sacrifice that Jesus made. That even though I sit here, that this space that I sit in is temporary. That I have another place that I exist in, even though I'm breathing and blood is pumping through this body right now. So there's a true hope. And the voice is here with me in this space. And I feel like this existence, as much as it's sad and painful at times, because when I tell you that I continue to still look for his presence here on earth, that I have to realize that all I have to do is this. So when I say that the way and the truth and the light is Jesus, I start to think about what it is that we can exist in, what it is that I can exist in, what it is that the rest of the world can exist in when they find him. When they start to seek for truth and they start to look around and start to realize that this world is not meant for you. This world is not meant for me. But now that I'm a part of the new covenant, what does it really mean to live here and exist with Jesus? And if we go back to the beginning and we go back to what God had asked Adam and Eve to do, it doesn't change. Adam and Eve's instructions were not to just worry about themselves. They didn't need to worry about themselves. God had everything covered. The only thing that they needed to do was follow his instructions. And that's what it means to be a part of the new covenant. That's the special thing about being in union with God, is to share the consciousness of God. Do we have the understanding that God has? No, because we're in a limited, fallen, corrupt reality, and my brain is like this big. Okay, maybe it's like this big, but like sometimes it feels like this big. And if you ask me to read certain words, because I'm dyslexic, it feels about like this big. But he's not asking me to understand things from my carnal perspective. He's asking me to shift inside the spirit, to no longer go by my own understanding and to start to do what it is that Adam and Eve should have done in the first place, was to ask him. We don't need to do the heavy lifting. We were never meant to do the heavy lifting. When we go back to the garden, it wasn't like they were like tilling the fields and everything that came off the trees, from what it sounds like, was like ready to pick. They didn't have to water, they didn't have to they didn't have to trim. It was just existence. It was just steward and watch and make sure that like what is here is Gucci. And from what it sounded like, it was like not really much to do other than hang out with Jesus and hang out with the Father. And I'm not saying that that's what my existence is like, because now that we're here, the real work begins. Pick up my cross. It's not my cross, it's his cross to bear. And if we go back to the story of what Jesus is and who Jesus is, who Jesus was when he was here, he did a lot of really hard work. And if you think for 1 second that him just knowing that he was Messiah made it easy for him, he didn't. It didn't. Even he looked up and cried to the Father and asked if there was somebody else to do it. But out of love, unconditional love, he sacrificed himself. So being a part of the new covenant is no longer about yourself. It's about others and those that are around you. Because if Jesus came here and only thing he cared about was himself, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And we would be stuck in this place forever. But we're not. So last week when we talked about the two worlds and the next possible path is him. It's the truth. Once you stop searching inside of this place for truth and love and acceptance and things that are fair, that you'll find your way to him, because everything was always made fair through Jesus. He never lied to us. He always told us the truth, and he always loved us unconditionally. Even on the cross, he never expected for us to even love him after. And I don't know anybody, one, will ever exist, has ever existed, that would ever do that same sacrifice other than him. All because of the love that he had for the Father. And all because the Father loved us all so much that none shall perish. Dang, dude. I don't even know where to go after that, because it's just, that's the truth. Being a part of the new covenant is all about denying self. On a daily basis, I have two voices. The voice of God or the voice of self that speak to me. The voice of God helps me to stay eternal and spiritual, to live for things that are outside this place. And the voice of self wants me to continue to live in the delusion of this world. And I'm not going to say that that battle's not hard, because there's plenty of times that I sit here in this space talking to Jesus about how I wish that I was somewhere else. And then I wish that I was doing the things that I saw as I scrolled, and I see shoes, and I see cars, and I see vacations, and I see people that could just go spend $150 on, I don't know, popcorn. I don't know who's spending $150 on popcorn. That's a lie. I've never seen anybody spend $150 on popcorn, but ice cream? No, maybe not ice cream either. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. There's some stuff out there in this world that you're just like, why is that $150? I don't get it. Your flesh can justify it. And what it really means to discern and live in this world and live in the fallen place is to just listen to God to help you know the way. Jesus, he is the truth, the way, and the light. And no one gets to the Father but through him. I hope that what we talked about last week gives you a greater understanding of where we live and what is possible now through Jesus. There is no going back to the garden. It's only going forward from here. And if you want to stay inside the flesh, this place offers to you nothing but death, and nothing but heartache, and nothing but a vapid, just wasteful existence. That, yeah, it sounds fun, but we have such a short time here compared to all of eternity. And if only love exists inside of the presence of God, then there is only one truth, the way and the life, which is through Jesus. So I hope that explains who Jesus is, what Jesus did, and what it really means to be in the new covenant underneath him, and what he restores, which is love and communication, and then your rightful place in heaven. Even if we separate heaven from it, your rightful place in your true existence for what God designed you to be. We are more real in spirit and truth than we are in flesh and blood. So I hope everybody begins to understand that. Until next time, everybody have a great week and be good.